Hey, this is Miss Cooper here with your Week 5 commentary video. We are looking at the Harlem Renaissance this week. So we have given you a document. That's what it looks like. Okay. And I annotate everything that I read, and I want to make sure that you're doing that if you're in front of me, okay, in the class, or if you're on the screen, behind the screen, and you're at home. If you can't print the document out, make sure that you kind of can double your screen, as in like press this 2 squares, make yourself 2 screens, and follow along and like stop and make notes about things, because you're going to write your 5 facts, but make sure you also kind of annotate or make notes about the document. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading and summarizing for you. So it says here, when slavery was abolished in 1865, African Americans were an overwhelmingly rural people. In the years that followed, there was a slow but steady migration of African Americans to the cities, mainly in the South. Migration to the North was relatively small, with nearly 8 million African Americans, about 90% of the total black population of the United States, still living in the South in 1900. But between 1910 and 1920, crop damage caused by floods and insects. Okay, anytime you see a problem, I would stop and underline that. Crop damage caused by floods and insects, mainly the boll weevil, deepened an already severe economic depression in southern agriculture. So that means things got pretty bad in terms of money. Whenever we're talking about economic, we're talking about money. Agriculture, we're talking about farming. So products that were, or even services that revolve around agriculture, they weren't making that much money. So that's not good. So people in the South tend to make their money off of agriculture. So this is what's going to help contribute to the migration, because there's an economic downturn because of the floods and that insect called the boll weevil. That's what you should gather from reading just those few sentences. So also it says destitute African Americans swarmed to the North in 1915 and 1916 as thousands of new jobs opened up in industries supplying goods to Europe, then embroiled in World War I. So hey, we hear that there are factories opening up north. So people left the South by the thousands and they went to northern cities where there were factory jobs. Okay, so between 1910 and 1920, an estimated 500,000 African Americans left the South. The Great Migration is what they call that. African Americans who fled from the South soon found that they had not escaped segregation and discrimination. Now, see, everyone had told people in the South that people in the North are not prejudiced, they're not racist, it's a whole different situation. Now, the abolitionist societies did get started up north, okay? These groups that were anti-slavery, they all got started in the North. But that doesn't mean there was not racial segregation and discrimination. Listen, they were confined mainly to overcrowded and dilapidated, that means run down, dilapidated housing. They were largely restricted to poorly paid menial jobs. That's like housekeeping work, being a maid, being a butler, being a chauffeur. Yeah, a custodian. Those are menial jobs. You work with your hands on hand and foot sometimes. So again, there were anti-black riots such as that in East St. Louis, Illinois in 1917. So we've got not bad jobs, anti-black riots, and continuation of segregation and discrimination. So they left the South and went to the North and had hoped that things would be better, but you have to do what you have to do. So this is, again, they went to the factories to go get jobs. So let's keep looking at that. So it says here, in the northern cities, the economic and educational opportunities. See, there's something good out of all that bad that we just said. They had to put you had to live in poor housing, dilapidated housing. They said you got the worst types of jobs. Cities were overcrowded and everything. There might still be discrimination, but there were some opportunities. Listen to this. The economic and educational opportunities for African Americans were immeasurably greater than they had been in the rural South. In addition, they were helped by various organizations such as the National Urban League that was founded in 1910. So that's a reason to make a move. If you can't start at the top, start where you are. Start at the bottom and then get there. So this is exactly where we were going here. So it says some African Americans opposed involvement in World War I. Black socialist aide Philip Randolph and Chandler Owen. You should underline those names when you see names or dates. You should underline them. Just like that riot in East St. Louis in 1917, you probably should underline all of that. Um, these guys, Philip Randolph and Chandler Owen, they argue that the fight for democracy at home should precede the fight for it abroad. The point of view of two black socialists. So, but when the United States entered World War I in April of 1917, most African Americans supported the step. During the war, about 1,400 black officers were commissioned. Some 200,000 African Americans served abroad, though most were restricted to labor battalions and service regiments. Didn't even want to give them a gun. Here we go again. Don't want to give a black man a gun. Afraid he's going to kill the white man. If we give him a gun, he's going to kill us. So, the Garvey movement and the Harlem Renaissance. Here's where it gets good. So many African Americans became disillusioned following World War I. So that word disillusioned pretty much is trying to say brainwashed, or you thought one thing and now you find out it's something different. Disillusioned. The jobs that they had acquired during the war all but evaporated in the post-war recession, which hit African Americans first and hardest. The Ku Klux Klan, which had been revived during the war, unleashed a new wave of terror against blacks. Mounting competition for jobs and housing often erupted into bloody race riots, such as those that spread over the nation in the Red Summer of 1919. Just killing people. The Klan just comes back out full force, and make sure you don't vote. So, in the face of such difficulties, a new Negro developed during the 1920s, the proud, creative product of the American city. The growth of racial pride among African Americans was greatly stimulated by the black nationalist ideas of Marcus Garvey. Born in Jamaica, he founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association there in 1914. Definitely underline Marcus Garvey, Universal Negro Improvement Association, a date. Make sure you have that. He came to the United States in 1917 and established a branch of the association in the Harlem district of New York City. By 1919, the association had become the largest mass movement of African Americans in the country's history, with a membership of several 100,000. That's a lot. It's more than T.D. Jakes. The Garvey movement was characterized by colorful pageantry, bright colors, uh, and appeals for the rediscovery of African heritage. Its goal was to establish an independent Africa through the return of a revolutionary vanguard of African Americans. Garvey's great attraction among poor African Americans was not matched. However, among the black middle class, which resented his flamboyance and his scorn of their leadership. Indeed, one of Garvey's sharpest critics was W.B. Du Bois, who shared Garvey's basic goals and organized a series of small but largely ineffectual Pan-African conferences during the 1920s. The Garvey movement declined after Garvey was jailed for mail fraud in 1925 and deported to Jamaica in 1927. He tried to rip people off. Yes, this is what happened to that movement. He put out some flyers and tried to get everybody to put money into buying a cruise ship so that they can all sail away from America and go to Liberia. I think it was Liberia, a colony that became independent. And Garvey said, we're going to take everybody over there. We're going to start up over there. And he was lying, and he took people's money, and it didn't happen. And I can't say he was just lying. I mean, it just looked like that because he gets jailed for mail fraud, as in he took some people's money and he didn't deliver on what he said. So whatever happened, could have been a breakdown of communication, we don't know, but that movement came to a halt after that. The flowering of African American creative talent in literature, music, and the arts in the 1920s was centered in New York City and became known as the Harlem Renaissance. Like the Garvey movement, it was based on a rise in race consciousness. Stay woke. Among African Americans. The principal contributors to the Harlem Renaissance included not only well-established literary figures such as Du Bois and the poet James Weldon Johnson, but also new young writers such as Claude McKay, whose militant poem, If We Must Die, is perhaps the most quoted African American literary work of this period. I would write that name down in the name of that poem, as well as those other artists' names. Okay, James Weldon Johnson, definitely. Claude McKay. It says here, other outstanding writers of the Harlem Renaissance were the novelist Jean Toomer, poets Countee Cullen, and Langston Hughes. During the 1920s, painters, okay, got some more names, Henry Oswald Tanner and Aaron Douglas, and performers Paul Robeson, Florence Mills, Ethel Waters, and Roland Hayes were also becoming prominent. Prominent means becoming more important and having more publicity. The Black cultural movement of the 1920s was greatly stimulated by African American journals, which published short pieces by promising writers. These journals included the NAACP's Crisis, that was W.E.B. Du Bois, he's the original editor of that magazine, and the National Urban League's Opportunity, so another magazine. The movement was popularized by African American philosopher Alan Locke in The New Negro, another journal, published in 1925, and by African American historian Carter G. Woodson, founder of the Association for the Study of Negro, is now called African American, Life and History, and editor of the Journal of Negro History. African American life during the Great Depression and the New Deal. So, Harlem Renaissance is going on. Remember the stock market crashes in 1929? You should remember that from your American history classes or possibly your economics class, or even a world history class. So the whole world felt the impact of the Great Depression, but that doesn't mean people aren't still listening to music and writing powerful poems. And the Harlem Renaissance is raging, and it's actually becoming more pronounced because people have stories to tell about this period. The Great Depression of the 1930s worsened the already bleak economic situation of African Americans. They were the first to be laid off from their jobs, and they suffered from an unemployment rate 2 to 3 times that of whites. In early public assistance programs, African Americans often received substantially less aid than whites, and some charitable organizations even excluded blacks from their soup kitchens. This intensified economic plight sparked major political development among African Americans. Beginning in 1929, the St. Louis Urban League launched a national Jobs for Negroes movement by boycotting chain stores that had mostly black customers but hired only white employees. Efforts to unify African American organizations and youth groups later led to the founding of another great organization that page stops, and the way I tend to do it is I'll pick up next time to be continued about the Great Depression and the New Deal. So this is where we are with the Harlem Renaissance. We've got some names, we've got some ideas, and I want you to take this document and annotate or take notes. Make sure you take all of your facts and the instructions, and thanks for listening. See you next time.